Stock market drops 20 points. Wall Street devastated. Stimulus bill. Investors cringe. Depression looming. We've become all too familiar with these words flashing across hundreds of headlines during the COVID-19 outbreak. One thing they all have in common is they all have something to do with the stock market. But what even is the stock market? To most people, it seems like a whole bunch of gibberish with crazy graphs and numbers scattered everywhere. And we end up feeling a lot like this guy. We're just confused and we don't understand. So why even bother? If you care about money, you should care about the stock market. The stock market has become a huge part of today's economy, and it is responsible for the wealth of millions. The stock market can seem intimidating at first, but in reality, it is quite simple and easy to understand. Today, I will describe what the stock market is, how it works, and what an investor does. Now let's start making sense of some of those headlines. The stock market has evolved a long way from where it first began. However, by looking back in its history, we can get a better idea of what it is at its very core. In an article titled "The History of the Stock Market," Johnson Hurd describes one of the first stock markets which resulted from the discovery of the Americas and this new world of opportunity. Join me and imagine you're an investor in these times, the good old 1600s. You don't have enough money to sponsor an entire voyage to the New World. And even if you did, it would be way too risky. What if the expedition failed and they didn't bring back any goods from the New World? Or even worse, what if their ship got attacked by pirates? So for this reason, the stock market was formed. A stock is a share or portion of a company that you own in exchange for money. The more shares you buy, the more stock of that company you will have. And this is a really important concept to nail down. So a stock is a share of a company that I get when I give that company my money. And the more shares you own, the more stock of that company you own. A stock market is a market created to buy and exchange stocks. The stock market allowed people to buy smaller shares of companies who sponsored multiple expeditions. Basically, you could give less money to many companies, and those many companies sponsored many voyages, and that meant even if a few failed, you were guaranteed some to succeed. This allowed more people to fund more expeditions, reducing risk for investors and increasing funding for the expeditions and the companies that sponsored them. Investors would actually meet up in coffee shops and exchange stocks with each other. Imagine sipping a cup of joe while making some dough. So now that you have a general idea of what the stock market is, let's talk about how it works. I want you to think about companies like roller coasters. Companies like Apple, Walmart, or Disney will have ups and downs just like you and me, and so will their stocks. They have good days and they have bad days. Monday morning for Disney might be bad because they made a huge mistake and disappointed everyone. On the same day, Apple might release a brand new iPhone that blows everybody's minds and has like all these random brand new features, and it makes it the best day ever for them. When a company seems to be doing poorly, investors sell their stock in the company. And if enough investors do this, it makes the stock crash, basically like a roller coaster. When a company does well again, investors regain confidence, and if enough investors buy stock again, it makes the company rise back up, just like a roller coaster does. Kimberly Amadeo, an expert economist, explained the stock market like this. Sellers try to get as much money as possible for each share, hopefully making much more than they paid for. Buyers try to get the lowest price so they can sell it for more profit later. This is how companies act like roller coasters, going up and down in value on the stock market. The stock market is a huge compilation of these roller coaster companies. It is a market where people can buy and sell their shares of stock. Now that you know how the stock market works, let's talk about what investors do. An investor can be your average Joe like me, or a full-time professional who invests millions upon millions of dollars for other people. Investopedia's financial writer, Justin Kuiper, says that an investor's job is to consider two things: value and future success. As hard as that might sound, it actually can be very easy. Value and future success are actually connected to each other. The stock market is filled with companies that have very few large and extended dips. This means that an investor can be fairly sure that they'll go back up into the future and have good value. Good investors look for companies on the falling end of roller coasters to buy. They pick good companies that they are confident will rise back up. Most companies do. Coca-Cola has steadily risen for the past 20 years. A smart investor would want to buy Coca-Cola at a small dip, knowing that in the future it'll definitely go back up. And so that would be a good buy. And that's what smart investors do. They predict the future by predicting future value. There are different kinds of investors that have different goals. Mike Webster from Investor Business Daily compares these two different types of investors to the tortoise and the hare. Long-term investors are like the tortoise. They buy and hold their shares for slow and steady returns. They're willing to hold their stock for a long period of time. Say they buy it at $100 and they're willing to wait 5 years for all those shares to be worth $150 a share. A short-term investor is like the hare. They want to buy today and sell tomorrow for quick and risky returns. They might buy a stock today that they think is going to go up in value, but they're not very sure. Either it's going to win big or it's going to lose big. So now you can understand why everybody freaked out when stocks crashed during this COVID-19 epidemic. People were losing money. The stock market really can seem intimidating, but it is actually quite simple and easy to understand. Today, you've heard about what the stock market is, how it works, and what investors do. Now, the next time you hear a report about the stock market in the news, you will know exactly what they're talking about. Thank you for listening.